combines the scope and depth of both the humanities and sciences to address the most pressing issues of medical ethics today. So what is this field of medical ethics? There are four main pillars of medical ethics, and these are generally autonomy, giving the patient agency and information to choose freely, beneficence, doing good, non-maleficence, committing to non-harm, and justice, ensuring equity and fairness in care. The premise for this four-principled oath is based, in part, on the Hippocratic Oath, named after Hippocrates, the Greek physician of the 5th through 4th centuries BCE, who may have been the original author of the oath that outlines moral behavior and expectations of a physician. While the current bioethics or medical ethics principles just outlined are informed by ancient Greek medical ideals, it may be surprising to learn that they are in fact only recent formulations, as recent as the 1970s, by philosophers Beecham and Childress. It's also helpful to remember that ideas and concepts of medical ethics are not the sole domain of Western culture. Ancient Chinese and Indian, as well as medieval Ottoman cultures, all produced treatises and pledges related to preserving the integrity of the relationship between a caregiver and her patient. Deeply embedded within the principles of medical codes throughout the world and over time is the value of trustworthiness, and in particular, a trustworthy relationship between physician and patient, but also between medicine and society. One of the ways this trustworthy quality is coming into focus in recent years in the U.S. is through telling and listening to stories of patients, family members, and caregivers. Indeed, these testimonies can reveal that our code of medical ethics may not be universally applied, but may need to be inflected and nuanced, given a specific need based on prognosis or religious concern. Thus, this is how the layered and productive relationships of ethics, medicine, and narrative are at the heart of this year's examination of the four pillars of Western medical ethics. With an emphasis on narrative and testimony, the Mudd Center for Ethics program will offer a multidisciplinary inquiry from the fields of anthropology, art, ethics, law, medicine, and religion into poignant questions and dilemmas related to medical research, treatment, and access. As experiences of illness and health are integral to the human condition, we hope this program will offer points of engagement with these complex issues. And we welcome you to join us at any point during this year-long program. sleeve caught on the thing.
Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me still? Yes? Okay. Still? Okay. Thanks so much for joining us. If you haven't already, I hope you'll spend some time across the hall. The show is up till February 7th. This has been a partnership with the Mudd Center for Ethics, which has been a real treat. And I'm going to pass the podium to Director of the Mudd Center and Professor of Art History, Melissa Kieran.
Good evening. So I'm going to start with a land and labor acknowledgement. The Mudd Center respectfully acknowledges that we inhabit unceded ancestral lands of Indigenous nations still governing in, such as the Monacan, and some displaced from the Shenandoah Valley. This land of Virginia and our own university has been worked and built by a legacy of unfree labor and indentured servitude. It's always a little hard to pivot from that to a gracious welcome, but I do. Thank you very much for being here. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Erica Lord, who will be giving us a public lecture on her work. The lecture and her exhibition, The Codes We Carry, Beads as DNA Data, both are intricately connected to this year's theme at the Mudd Center related to medical ethics. I'll say that the moment I saw Erica's work when I was at the Renwick Gallery at the Smithsonian in the fall of 2023, I knew immediately that it would be the fulcrum, the hub of the year-long inquiry into medical ethics, as her work addresses issues of access, justice, and inclusion within the medical system. To make this public lecture and exhibition possible, though, so it's one thing to have the idea, and it's quite another to actually make it happen, right? There were a lot of people who were involved. It was a huge team effort. I must absolutely extend my deepest gratitude to my colleague, Andrea LePage, and I know you're there. There you are. Who heard, really, she was the first to hear my musings about this, and very characteristically of her immediate response was to help to make it happen. And she did that, and through her efforts, several on-campus groups contributed generously to make this project a reality. The Native American and Indigenous cohort within the Office of Inclusion and Engagement, the Departments of Biology, Environmental Studies, History, and Art History, and also the Class of 1963 Scholars Residence Program through the Provost Office. I am deeply grateful to all of you who have helped to come together to make this happen. I'm also deeply indebted to Kevin McNamee Tweed, director now of Stanier Gallery, who is definitely the most steadfast person I happen to know of in this very moment. Lots of challenges, lots of stuff went on with all of this. He worked to get it done, and he worked closely with Maddie Hulton to make it happen, and I'm very grateful to you both. Of course, Kate Sacke, the ever-vigilant, patient, and good-humored colleague that I have the opportunity to work with at Mudd. Anything that comes through Mudd goes through her hands first and foremost, which is why everything that goes through Mudd is so beautifully running and smoothly running, and I am deeply grateful. And of course, Erica Lord, the amazing artist who we are fortunate to have with us this evening. Her work is compelling, and it is the product of an interdisciplinary engagement around complex, challenging, and sometimes deeply disheartening issues related to health disparities. Erica's artistic training started at Colton College in Minnesota, and she went on to get a Master's of Fine Arts at the Art Institute in Chicago. As an artist, her work has been shown in numerous venues, both nationally and internationally. As a teacher, she is currently at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, and most recently, she was named a 2024 Creative Capital Grant recipient. We're very fortunate to have you with us. Please help me welcome Erica Lord.
Do I have to do anything? Thank you. Just needs to wake up, I think. Or, there we are. Oh, the lights. Thank you. Well, hello. Thank you so much for such a kind welcome. And it, I can't say enough how exciting it was to be invited here and be connecting to and talking with, like, the idea or goal of this whole project was to try to reach out and hopefully have people in the medical field or in biology or people that envision data and how that is, like, different groups of people outside of art and art to think about some of the struggles that I've been dealing with, that I've seen a lot of people in my community deal with. And it's having a show like this or having this opportunity to speak feels like finally getting that chance to be heard, that instead of just kind of shouting into the wind. So, like, I really appreciate this opportunity, and again, thank you enough. Let's see. I always start with this quote, in part because it helps my voice calm down, but I think it's important too. It's Audre Lorde, an excerpt from one of her poems. And when we speak, we are afraid. Our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. Kind of along that lines of all of us are our grandparents' wildest dreams come true. Like, and even if scared or nervous, if your voice is shaking, still remembering to speak up. So I am from both Alaska and Michigan. I was born and raised in the village of Nenana. It's about an hour south of Fairbanks. I like the circumpolar map because I used to do this when I was a kid, trying to figure out where all the different parts of me came from. And I just loved this, like, drawing lines and learning the stories of how my ancestors all ended up in Alaska, of all places. It's a really interesting crossroads of stuff, of people, animals, populations. So on the right side, I put a little arrow towards Nenana to sort of show it's right in the center of Alaska and has the most extreme temperature range in the entire world. It gets down to 70 below in the winter before wind chill and up to 100 in the summer. And when my parents split up, I moved to Upper Michigan with my mom. The other hand, the green part that people forget about, like with Michigan, we often get left off maps. And there it was just a lot of snow. And it's one of the, I think it's the largest Finnish population outside of Finland. My mom's side is all Finnish. So I am Athabaskan Indian from Central Alaska, Iñupiat, which is Inuit or Eskimo, from the northernmost point of Alaska, Finnish, Swedish, English, and Japanese. And ever since I was a little kid, like, I was always kind of fascinated with the division of it, trying to draw on myself, like, well, one arm, and, like, should probably be Finnish. And I think, like, those sort of naive, like, musings of trying to understand mixed identity kind of grew into a different thing. And I think a lot of it stems from the way that we are defined as Native by the government, and this challenge to learn how to define ourselves. So these are some of the portraits that are over in the gallery right now. I like to deal with a lot of issues of trying to understand and challenge the idea of who and what Native people are, who and what we look like, because I always thought it was interesting that even still, people will freely tell you, you don't look Native. I don't know any other group, like if someone identifies as Black, I don't know anyone that would have the gall to say, you don't look Black. But it happens all the time with Native people, or mixed people in general. And part of this series, well, it started from nearly on a daily basis from the time I was like young through definitely all through my 20s and most of my 30s. Almost on a daily basis, somebody would ask me if my eyes were real. I must wear color contacts. Do you tan? Do I dye my hair? And what are you? Often before they ask your name. And I think almost anyone that's mixed has heard that question over and over. But I wondered what it was that was so unbelievable about this, that if I had brown eyes, would that be more believable or acceptable, or if I had blonde hair? That my identity, I felt like, shifted along with my context more than what people allowed me to identify as. So in Alaska, growing up, I was always told that I was little Gisick baby, white baby, a little light bulb. And then I go to Michigan, and I was told that I was a little dark-skinned wild Indian. And it was confusing as a little kid, because I was often being told what I wasn't, or that I belonged to a different place. And I didn't understand why why isn't there space for me? And was curious about what it was that people were looking for in my face and my identity. So I started playing around with these portraits, changing my eye color, hair color, skin color over and over and over to sometimes be different parts of me, sometimes be people in my family that I envisioned, or people that I was afraid of. I get told all the time, again, you don't look Native, until they saw the photo with braids, and then they said, oh, now I see it. I was like, really? Only took a Halloween wig of braids to make you see that I was Native? I was like, that really says something. So that's part of why they're just numbered. I didn't want whatever audience or viewer to be influenced by possibly a name or some other identifiers. So I just wanted to number them and see how people responded to them, because it felt like it's often these little clues or clothing or something that people look for. And I understand the need to understand another person or put them in a category, but oftentimes it's really limiting. I always think when people ask which one I identify with most, it's the one in the yellow Carlton sweatshirt. It's like, I think like a lot of artists, I feel very awkward and shy, and kind of turtle into my sweatshirt. But just sort of exploring identity and trying to present like new, different, or challenging ideas of what a Native person might look like. Because my blood doesn't change from photo to photo. But people's response to it does. And the other part of this that I kept thinking about was the connection or relationship between phenotype and genotype. Genotype being the actual genetic code that's inside of you, and phenotype being how it actually presents, or what I refer to as the mixed race lottery. You never know which part is going to come out. The odds that I ended up with blue eyes is pretty, I think we did the math one time, and it's like single number percentage, because to come through on my dad's side, it had to have skipped at least 4 generations. Maybe my great-great-grandfather had blue eyes. He was a Swedish English whaler, but we don't know. But someone had to have them on that side for them to come through. So it's just interesting how that comes out. And this also connects to the medical stuff that I will be talking about too, how I might react or respond to different medications, how what diseases or conditions I might be vulnerable to. But oftentimes doctors don't know what to do if you're not in a clear category. So we'll talk more about that. These are some of my earlier works, just to give some context. This was one of my quartered, quantified, and classified, my blood quantum cabinet. So on your official Indian card, your Bureau of Indian Affairs card, it will, in order to be considered legally native in this country, to be able to call yourself that, you have to be 1/4 blood from a tribe that is both state and federally recognized. If you're state recognized but not federal, you don't get a BIA card. I went to school with people that were 8/8, but since they weren't 1/4 from one tribe, they weren't considered native. They don't get a card, but they're full-blooded. And if you don't have a card, you don't get to call your artwork native art either. If you do, you can face $100,000 fines for each piece of artwork that you sell with the label native art. So things like that come up all the time, this like regulation of who is allowed to call themselves or identify as native. All of these rules came from the Indian Arts and Crafts Act, which was intended to protect Native people and prevent all of these fake reproductions of Native art that were often sold at tourist shops. But since it was written quickly and often without consulting Native people, it was written poorly, and it ended up excluding more Native people than it actually helped protect. So I think about that a lot, since my Indian card says 1/4 Athabaskan plus 1/16 Eskimo, they don't even name the tribe, equals total blood 5/16. And so I always wanted to see it. So I figured out how much blood was in my body on average for someone of my size and stature, and divided it into 16 equal preserve jars. This idea of preserving bloodlines or preserving history or culture. We are the only people in this country that are tracked and numbered based on our race and that blood quantum, which feels eerie. So, because I used to do that like drawing on myself thing, I also wanted to see, is it these 5 jars that make me Native, or help me identify, or is it something more than that? Because blood alone doesn't feel like a good definition. These are my tattooed arm series. So I wanted to show both of them together. On the left side is my blood quantum. On the right side is my enrollment number. Both of these things are on my Native card. And I was so intended to photo merge these together, but then seeing the breakdown of all the photos stitched together made more sense to me, because we're constantly being divided up. So a close-up, my enrollment number, I'm clearly making a parallel to World War II tattoos on the arm. Hitler had US consultants and asked them, you were so good at getting rid of your Indian problem, how can I get rid of my Jewish problem? And had US consultants that came over and helped them. So put them in camps or reservations, tattoo them and track them, and then systematically start breaking them down. So we set a model here, and Hitler followed it. So I was really nervous about making this project. I waited a long time before I went ahead and did it. I want to make sure that I did it in a way that was respectful, but clearly making this connection in parallel to another horrible genocide. And on the right side, my blood quantum. So I use my body a lot, since a lot of my work is, I often think about art being my way of responding to and reflecting and just processing the world around me. And like, so when I was younger, I was always very proud of my racial mix. Like, I thought it was really interesting, and I was very proud of it. Being mixed was not a problem until I met the outside world that suddenly started telling me, like, you know, isn't it hard to be mixed, or pushing me to, like, well, which do you identify with more, Native or Finnish or white or this, or where's your home, Alaska or Michigan? And every time being like, well, both. And they're like, yeah, but which one? Because you have to go in one or the other. And I thought that was just curious and frustrating, because, like, yeah, within myself, I was fine. And it was, again, like, other people's response to me that kind of made me start questioning things or being nervous or insecure about stuff. You know, like, I went to a school very similar to this. Carleton College is another private liberal arts college about the same size, and also very hard academics. However, you guys made a good choice coming here. Like, it did set me up for life very well. But even, you know, like, getting into Carleton, like, my best friend's first response was, oh, you got in because you're Native. And I was like, man, like, I am also smart. like, Jesus, you know, that's not the only thing. But then doubting it and being really worried and asking my admissions counselor, you know, like, I don't know what you did to get me in here, but thank you. And I think he kind of sensed my nervousness. He was like, Eric, you had a good essay, you had a good interview, that's what got you in, like, and it helped me relax. But I hated that was a constant question from my peers, even from my family, that, I don't know, somehow it complicated it. So coming back to this, sorry, I think about, because I use myself as this, it's me, but it's not me at the same time. I wanted to kind of address, I had these mailbox letters, you know, the stick-on ones that you have, and I was thinking about these different things that other people put on you, right? So whether it's names or assumptions or criticisms or something, it's a lot that you carry with you all the time. And I was curious about, like, that identity shifting thing again. The way people treat me in summer when I'm suddenly tan is different than how I get treated in the winter. It was drastic. So I, you know, kind of these tongue-in-cheek, I don't know, statements or labels or things that I felt were, you literally carried on you. So these are actually tanned into my skin. I tan fast. It was pretty fast to tan them in. It was very hard to get them off. So it took months. But so, you know, saying something like I tend to look more Native. This also kind of started from, I was at the Art Institute of Chicago when I was working on this series, and I was looking for role models or some kind of example or model of, you know, what other mixed Native people are making work about that identity. Like, a lot of us are mixed. So how was no one else talking about this? And I knew that, I knew there was an audience out there somewhere, or if they weren't there yet, they were gonna get born eventually. But even in grad school, during my critiques, I often got someone asking me, I mean, how many other mixed race Native women can you be making work for? And I was like, not only making work, that speaks to other mixed race Native women. I was like, are you only making work for white men? I was like, I mean, maybe, but, it's a weird question. Why would you ask me that? And in reversing it, like, do you hear how weird that is to say that? No, it's like there are, even if it is race, even if you're not Native, there is parallels that I think people really understand and connect to. I was reading a lot of W.E.B. Du Bois, his theory of triple consciousness. So anyone that is a person of color or a woman or anyone that's been in a position that's not the majority, he was always talking about how you have this idea of who you are, and then there's the idea of who other people think you are, and then your idea of what you think other people think of you. And when you're in a position like that, you're constantly going through those different things and code switching to figure out how to connect or translate to this group and this group and this group. So, sorry, I tend to look more Native. I don't really, but I also was kind of trying to ask, like, but whose idea of Native am I trying to be? Because it's not mine. I get called half-breed a lot. I remember my auntie was like, well, yeah, you little half-breed. You don't even look Native, Erica. You're a little half-breed. Oh, you're not even a half-breed. You're a little quarter-breed. And I was like, God, like, aunties are mean sometimes. But so putting that on my skin, positioning different things in different fonts and stuff. So Indian looking, I was looking at a lot of like historic boudoir photos, and this idea with a lot of my work to try to pull people in with maybe sparkly, pretty belt or a well-composed photo, and then once you are pulled in, maybe encounter the sort of politics or ideas that are there. Colonization was often what was through often land and through women, and so colonized me down my leg. This piece is the artifact piece revisited. Are any of you guys familiar with James Luna's artifact piece? I hope. I can't even see hands, but hopefully there's hands out there that know it. So James Luna did the artifact piece back in 89 and 90, I believe. And he put himself on display in the San Diego Museum of Man. And there was those tags like identified that, there was a callus from his wedding ring that was no longer there, that he had scars on his knuckles from a bar fight and different things like that. And this began from like a student project where after Marina Abramovic's 7 Easy Pieces, where she reenacted 7 pieces, 7 performances that some of them were hers, some of them weren't hers. And it sort of sparked a conversation when I was at the Art Institute about if performance is about the body and that body changes, how does that then change the performance, or is it a completely new thing? So they invited students to perform works that they were inspired by, and I did James's piece. Fast forward a year or so later, I was meeting with Dr. Laura Evans, who I taught with at Evergreen State College, and I was like, yeah, I did that piece, like in school. And she was like, that's a good idea. You should do that for real. I was like, yeah, right. Like, I'm going to call James Luna and say, I'm Eric Lord. You've never heard of me, but I want to do your most famous piece. And she said, yeah, say that. And I was too nervous I said I would call him, but I was too nervous. Like, I guess it's encouragement for the other, like, shy and awkward, scared artists out there. There's still a way to stumble your way through and find success. But so I didn't call him, and after a few days, all of a sudden he called me, and I was like, oh my God, it's James Luna. It's on my phone. Like, I think I have to answer. And he was like, why haven't you called me? He sort of became a really close advisor, or sometimes referred to as my art dad. Like, so we set up a meeting, and trying to be a good, like, student, I had a million little questions that I was asking him. I wanted to make sure that I did it right and paid respect to him. And after a few, he was like, Erica, just calm down. He's like, listen, I'm done with this piece. This is your piece now. You can do whatever you want with it. And I was like, that was the biggest gift that he could have given me, to just give me that freedom, because, like, if you guys Google this piece at all, there's always some debate every year or so of like, well, she's not James Luna. I was like, I wasn't trying to be James Luna. That's why I changed the title to just adding revisited. But so this was performed at the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian in New York, their George Gustav Hay Center. And I told the Smithsonian, I was like, I really want to do it with you guys, but I want to make sure that nobody touches me and nobody takes photos of me. If you guys can ensure that, I will work with you to do this. And so things, James had 2 boxes as well, like stuff from his contemporary life and stuff from his like native life. And then these little tags along my side that identified different things. I was like, well, what would be analyzed differently with me versus James? And so I pointed out things like my skateboarding scars instead of bar fight scars, that saying something like her hair is cut short, though we're unsure if it's due to traditional mourning practices or just going along with the style of the times. You know, the pigment on her face could be drawn back to traditional face painting and practices, which are all means of trying to attract the attention of the opposite sex. And then there was a tag about the subject seems to have adequate birthing hips, though there's no evidence that she's given birth, though we're unsure whether it's due to biological reasons like infertility or unseen psychological reasons. I thought it was a funny joke. And then in the Q&A session, a woman asked me, "Are you really barren?" I was like, wow. Yeah, that it's kind of amazing what people will ask you. With the tanning project, when it was shown in France, a woman like looked at the photo and looked at me and looked at the, "Oh, it's you." And I was like, "Yeah, this is my work." I was very, she was like, "So I see that you tend to look more native. You seem skinnier now. Did you also gain weight to look more native?" I was like, wow. I was like, and those are moments, I think, that are some of the hardest moments in your career, because you're like, don't punch the French lady. Like, don't freak out. That's like, if you're too emotional, if you're too angry, you get judged in different ways. Then people stop listening. I'm going to try to go faster as best I can. So just for more context, I take a lot of historical things and try to make them relevant again. So Nanook of the North Side, drawn from Nanook of the North. One of the first documentaries, has anybody seen Nanook of the North? Oh, yay! Like one person. So even though very few people have seen it, it's still responsible for a lot, like the majority of people's understanding of Arctic cultures and people. So to me, it felt like that shows the power of media and photography and art, that if, whether it's accurate or not, people absorb that and understand Arctic cultures like that. So if that is what created incorrect or misunderstandings about different native cultures, then maybe it's through those same means we can address and fix and repair these things, create new dialogues, new voices. So this is at the Edmonton City Pool. I was hunting with a broomstick. Like, it's pretty funny, these kids like swimming up to me, they're like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Hunting for seals." And they're like, there's no seals in here, is there? I was like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Just look closer." But so again, like, this all connects to like how or why I arrived at the dog blankets and things. People were like, "You're Alaska Native and you're an artist. You must make totem poles." Like, not exactly. They're not from my area. But if I was going to make totem poles, what would I make them out of? And so I started going to tire shops and junkyards and creating petroleum products and byproducts are on the forefront of every Alaskan's mind, or most Americans. So created these 12 to 14 foot like stacked tire totems and oil drum totems, my trash drum series. So making reference to history and to our traditional art and culture, And bringing it contemporary is something that I feel like helps connect this story. So on the left side and the top is, or I guess everything except for the middle, bottom, is examples of traditional parka making. We will like piece together black and white parka or black and white caribou skins to make these complicated little patterns, because otherwise everyone looks the same in the winter with a big puffy parka. But those little things identify family or region. And to me, I started thinking about DNA too, like that almost you could create chromosome patterns with them. And in the bottom is an example of like a contemporary interpretation. We started using bias tape and ribbon, layered and folded and stitched to create new patterns that reference the old ones, but are brought into contemporary life. So in the same vein, like on the left side is an example of a traditional baby belt. I really love baby belts. It's one of the, they put so much work and so much beadwork into stuff like this because having a baby should be celebrated, and it draws connections between the community and family and new generations. And so looking at these objects, I was trying to think, like, they're either called baby belts or burden straps. Like a lot of tribes have some version of a burden strap to carry like a bundle of sticks or a jug of water or something on your back. And so I started questioning, like, well, what's my burden? Because I don't carry babies or sticks and stuff. And I started thinking diabetes, or there's a lot of burdens that we have medically. So these are DNA or RNA microarray analyses patterns. If there's any bio kids out there, I know some students have run into these. So whenever you need to get tested for a disease, they take your DNA or your RNA and grid it on a slide or a test strip and run it through, and the colors and patterns tell you whether or not you have a disease and how much or how advanced it is. So like you might find like stage 4 or stage 3, cancer or something like that. One of the things I liked about the liberal arts college is that I got to connect with people outside the art world. So one of my friends that was in the biology department, he ended up becoming a microbiologist, first showed me these tests. He was like, I don't know what you do with them, but they're colorful, so I thought you'd like them. I was like, thank you. Like, they just kind of stuck in my head for a few years. And then I started thinking about creating them into this so that they can become literally a diabetes burden strap or a breast cancer burden strap. So I read a lot of medical studies that I don't totally understand, but all of the test patterns come from published medical studies, and then we convert them or turn them into these beautiful, like, heavily beaded works. So when I went to the store, I asked for a bead loom. I've never used a bead loom before this project, and she brought it out. They're very small. I was like, oh, they're for bracelets. She was like, yeah, how big do you need? It's like 6 feet at least. It's like, yeah, those don't exist. So, this is one of the things that I really love about sculptors is like, if I didn't know how to do it, I'll figure it out. And if it doesn't exist, I'll figure out how to build it. So we now have, I think, 5 or 6 different looms. This is Bertha here. She's the biggest. But, just trying to understand and start building, creating. It was exciting to finally see things come to be. So diabetes burden strap on the top, breast cancer burden strap on the bottom. And you can see with the breast cancer one, the test is printed right below it, and you can sort of see how it is a direct translation into the beads. The thing that finally had that aha moment for me was that I came across these 4mm beads, and I was suddenly like, oh, I know I'm gonna make this. I think I have a good idea. And those moments are so rare but exciting. So here's just some additional ones that I've made. Every time we made a new one, we changed it a little bit, we learned a little more. I didn't have anyone else to ask for advice since I didn't know anyone else that was making stuff this large scale. Then we started adding fringe to it. So this is my multiple myeloma burden strap, DNA, RNA microarray analysis. This one is in the Newark Museum of Art, if any of you guys go through there. I was very proud of of this, I asked them to please put my grandmother's name in there too, because I made this for her. So she is an example of part of my frustration with the medical system, starting with her. For years, she went to the doctors and was complaining of symptoms, and they just treated her like she was that old, like, annoying Native woman who just keeps complaining. So they would give her Tums and send her home. And then after she got worse and worse, then they told her, maybe it's leukemia, maybe it's breast cancer, maybe it's this. Every time she went in, it was a different cancer, but just send her home with Tums. And it was right, I think, maybe a year before her death that they finally decided it was multiple myeloma, which is a different blood cancer. But again, that, like, it takes a lot for a lot of Native people to even go out and seek help with the doctors, that the trust, like, there's not a lot of trust with the medical system, you know, that up through the 70s, they did experiments and forced sterilization on a lot of Native women, that they would go in to have a baby, and when they came out, they were like, well, we had to tie your tubes, or we had to sterilize you. And that without their consent, without their knowledge. And so I wanted to sort of address a lot of that. Even up through the 90s, like, the IHS doctor I went to gave me Depo-Provera, which I don't even think they use anymore, but they were testing Depo-Provera on Native women through IHS. And I was like, that was the 90s. But so I just, yeah, oops, sorry. It was just a lot of this frustration, trying to figure out how to speak up or how to address these things. The other set of artworks that are from this, I'm gonna have to speed through this, but I grew up dog sledding, that's me. I'm very cute. And I really miss dogs. My friend Laura was like, you just wanted to decorate some dogs, and that's why you made dog blankets. I was like, maybe. Like, when I got the opportunity to show at the Smithsonian, I just really wanted to have a dog team in the middle of all those Corinthian columns and pretty, like, old beauty. So I was thinking a lot about the 1925 Sarum Run. It was also known as the Great Race of Mercy, that the village of Nome was dying of diphtheria. If any of you guys have seen Balto or Togo, those are two movies that talk about this history. Balto and Togo were the two lead dogs out of these 20 different dog teams that helped save the village of Nome, that in 25, mostly kids were dying of diphtheria, and they needed to get the antitoxin out there. So they brought it up by train to my village and then started a relay where they wrapped it in beaver furs and started handing it off, one to the next team, to the next team. It was like over 600 miles, I believe. It's now what the Iditarod Trail runs along, to remember that. And they got there, they saved the village, and they wiped out diphtheria. But so to honor those dogs, it was interesting. While I started working on this project, in the middle of it, COVID started happening, and there was this sort of panic or huge effort to try to get vaccines out to the villages, because we don't have doctors in the villages or nurses or anything. If you get sick, you have to fly into Fairbanks or Anchorage or Seattle if it's serious. So, and to also honor that history, they called it Project Togo after that lead dog. And I was working on the series at the same time. I was like, it's very timely. So this is a traditional dog blanket or tuppy. They have a lot of bells. They're not for warmth. They're mostly just for, like, fanfare. Like, if you're coming into a village for a potlatch or a ceremony, you would stop outside the village, dress up the dogs, so that when you enter, you come in with, like, all this jingling and beauty. So I wanted to make this team. And so starting with diphtheria as a nod to that history, and then looking at diseases that historically I feel like we've learned from and built vaccines from, and that we have a connection to Native history. Smallpox, I think almost everyone knows that history with Native people. TB, Native people are 600 times more likely to get tuberculosis than any other group, which is crazy numbers. Diabetes, ovarian cancer, and COVID on the bottom there. So again, like even this modern day in New Mexico, we're like less, maybe 6% of the population, but we were 58% of the COVID cases and most of the deaths. When it's that disproportionate, something is going on that needs to be addressed. So I will just speed through these. These are how we arrived at them, the tests on the top and the finished pieces on the bottom. So each of these went to the Smithsonian with a whole team of little dogs. And my COVID ones. That's them, my puppies. I was really excited to see them. And the guy that makes the sleds, him and his wife hand make them in Pennsylvania. They came down to DC for the opening, and which was such an honor to have that. And the newest piece of this, which is in the gallery, is that I'm scanning in each beaded piece at a super high resolution. I was telling the photo class, I challenge you to find any mistake in there, because each of these pieces is about 14 different scans pieced together. And about 22 to 24 layers on each of them. So if any of you guys can find a mistake, let me know, because it's been a lot of time piecing them together. But I wanted something to be, I want to make them a little larger than life, and it's also something a little more accessible, because those beaded pieces take so long to make that, I don't know anyone that can actually afford the beaded pieces, not an individual person. So I want to make a series of prints that was accessible. And then the idea, hopefully, is to start getting these into maybe, I don't know, hospitals or research centers or something, that maybe a researcher will look at this and realize that maybe we have to change the way we do research. Like that I was saying last night, and this is my last, I'll wrap up, sorry. So I was struggling with some health issues, and I was trying to get help at the same hospital that my grandma died at. And every time I go in, they say, "You're not in pain, you're just depressed. You're not in pain, you're just anxious. You just need to learn how to meditate. You're just a drug-seeking native." And nobody would listen to me. And that crazy frustration, they kept giving me antidepressants, which I didn't want. But if you don't take what they give you, then they write that you're non-compliant, and then they won't treat you after that. So I nearly died, and because they weren't listening to me when I was saying I was having some bad reaction to one of the medications. And because the doctors weren't aware of, or either not aware or didn't care, that there is genetic differences in how we process medications, what we're vulnerable to, how our body reacts. So they kept shoveling all these antidepressants at me. Turns out I can't process antidepressants. But when I was looking for proof to help support my voice, I realized the only tests that medical studies that focus on Native populations specifically only focus on them for addiction and diabetes. And so that's the only way they're all ever going to see us and connect us. So if I had something, it took a lot of research to finally find that it was the Asian genes, that there was a study on that and can't process. But yeah, it shouldn't take that much effort. It shouldn't, just to have someone listen to you. As I was like, I'm worried about my body and my health. I wish you were too. But so I got asked to create something for the NYU's new Center for Medical Research, Virology, and Regenerative Medicine. And so things like this is where I hope that maybe you can start putting this stuff in too, because hopefully you guys connect to it, whether it's through the beauty or through the backstory. I just hope people connect to it and start thinking about stuff. The best surprise during the Smithsonian was that people identified with each piece in a positive way that they came up with. I survived breast cancer, like I connected with that. And so taking, I think that's what artists do. We take difficult things and we transform them into something that is easier to understand or look at even. And so hopefully that's what we're doing here too, taking the struggle and turning it into something beautiful and sparkly, whether it's about like a badge of survival. So that is my thank you. Anabasi, thank you so much. Do I put these up? House lights? Oh, did they come up? There we go. So I apologize. I'm sorry.
I think we'll shift questions to the atrium.
Oh,
So,
yeah, so I'm so sorry.
Thanks so much.
I just had so much to say. Thank you. Ooh, I'm going to take a photo of everybody else.
Can we take a picture of you?